My name is Tom Moreno. I'm a captain with the Valley Regional Fire Authority. I am also a member of Washington Task Force 1, which is the FEMA Urban Search and Rescue Team, and been deployed a couple of times on disasters, seen them firsthand. And so we'll talk a little bit about the perspective that gives us. And what I wanted to do first was talk a little bit about philosophy, okay? We're going to talk about all the hazards that come up, but being prepared for a disaster is much like being prepared for a war. Know your enemy, know yourself, and know the difference between what brings you victory and what can bring you defeat. Because if you're defeated in a survival situation, disaster situation, what happens? There you go. You die, all right? And let me tell you something. If you do not think that your world is going to change when the ground starts shaking and we get that subduction zone quake here in the Washington area, I guarantee you you're wrong. Because it will change completely, totally, and instantly. All right? So let's keep that in mind as we go through this. I don't think I'm being too melodramatic when I say that, because just think about your entire world changing. Your home, your business, everything that you hold dear to you is flat on the ground. Auburn, as we'll see a little bit later in a map that we have of the hazard area, is a hotbed of all things disaster-like. And if something happens here, we're going to get hit pretty hard. All right? So with that, we're going to talk about a family disaster plan. We're going to teach you how to let all your family members know how and when to turn off the gas, electricity, things like that. And it's very simple. Okay? Teach children 911, and then we'll talk about tuning different radio stations to get information out. Most of us are pretty familiar with that. But understand that the plug-in radio that you have isn't going to work in a disaster. So you need a nice battery-powered one with an antenna on it that is tuned to Cairo or Como or one of those stations. And then American Red Cross. There are a few other agencies out there that are great assistance too. These NGOs or non-governmental officials and organizations are very helpful. In all the disasters that you see, NGOs probably do as much or more work than the government does. And they do great work. Salvation Army, American Red Cross, church groups, you name it. All right, for all hazards, and let me be clear on this. 72-hour, 3-day disaster kit is the bare minimum. You should be prepared with food, water, and shelter for a minimum of 72 hours. All right? Develop an emergency communication plan. Okay, and let's go back to the last big earthquake we had. All right? I was the shift duty officer for the city of Auburn. I'm driving around in my expedition, checking out the area, doing a windshield survey after the earthquake happened, right? So one of the places that we need to go is the school. So I go driving by Auburn High School, right? All the students are out on the football field. They evacuated the building, perfect. But the next thing I see is a bit troubling to me. And guess what that is? Every single one of them's got a cell phone up to their ear, all right? And they're not even texting. They're going like this. So what does that do to the backup communication system for emergency services? Because if our radios fail, which they did, can't get a signal. Yeah, cell phones are a backup, and we couldn't get a signal. The things you need to consider is that if you need to get a hold of somebody, family member, relative, friends, whomever, the best thing to do is have a contact point outside of the area. Utah is a really good example. Eastern Washington, California. I have an old Marine buddy of mine that I call back in Virginia. Which brings me to one of my anecdotal materials. You'll hear me say this a lot too. The 7 Ps. Anybody know what those are?
Preparedness, prevention.
Close. Prior proper planning prevents pretty poor performance. That's the G version of it. So, but remember that anecdote because it really counts, especially in disasters. Being prepared. Prior proper planning prevents bad performance. It really does. Okay? So, and the other one I'll use a lot is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid, because I am. And the simpler it is, the easier it is to do when the stress level is way up here. Okay? So keeping it simple and doing the simple things that get you through the disaster and on to the next step is the way to go. All right? Because just try and think of being able to carry out complex tasks when the world has changed as we know it. It's tough. Okay. Know your insurance, keep it up to date, really important stuff. Disasters, they're relatively unexpected. They are, up here, they are unexpected. What's the first thing that comes to mind as far as disasters in Western Washington? First thing. Earthquake. Yeah, that's the first thing I think of when I think of disasters around here. What kind of warning we get here? Yeah, none. The fact is we don't have the luxury of having a big warning and a lot of lag time for disasters that occur up here. So you have to be prepared beforehand. You're not going to have 2 weeks to go, okay, I need food, water, shelter for at least 3 days, right? Not going to happen. Disasters overwhelm professional emergency services. There are about 120 firefighters, uniformed personnel in around Auburn area that are available, but there are only 24 on shift. In a major disaster, those people are going to be so busy taking care of things, we're going to bypass homes that are burning. We're going to take care of the hospitals, the schools, the high occupancy buildings. All right? And that's why you folks are here, because in your neighborhoods, who's going to provide the leadership that allows people to function in this disaster? You're the ones that are going to be able to advise people on, you need to turn off your gas, you need to shut off the water, you need to pull the breakers, things like that. You folks are going to go out, multiply, and preach the gospel of preparedness. And then, if disaster does occur, you're going to provide the leadership that allows people to get by in these disasters. CERT is a vital link in the emergency service chain. I guarantee you when we see the people with the green vests and the green helmets and stuff, we know we got some assistance. And then we can take on the more complex operations or even bypass certain geographical areas and move on to another one because we know you folks are already involved. And that really provides a great backup service for us because it'll take 3 days for the feds to get here. As a USAR team member, I know that if I am alerted and deployed to a disaster, I'm supposed to be able to get there and be in operation in 6 hours. Reality says that it takes us time to get all our folks alerted, and our task force is made up of firefighters from Seattle, King County, and Pierce County. It's made up of doctors and police officers and engineers and structural specialists and things like that. They need time to get together. They go get their gear, they load up, they go to McCord, get on an aircraft, and fly out. Well, if they're on the ground and working within 24 hours, that's considered pretty quick. Okay? So, we go back to the 72 hours, and you have to be prepared to be on your own for that long. Disaster effects likelihood in this region. Well, how likely? We've got fire hazards, drought, cyber terrorism, utilities, landslide, earthquake terrorism. They're all in the medium category. Low, volcano, lahar, transportation. And then up in the high, we've got severe weather, flooding, hazardous materials. Hazardous materials are driving up and down our freeways and riding on our rails. Every single day, there are LPG tanks, huge ones, parked in our city. Some right next to the hospital. And they're going by on the rail lines. And they're driving up and down the freeways and through town. Okay? So it can occur at any time. All right, severe weather and flooding. Our severe weather usually consists of 3 inches of snow when everybody freaks out and can't get up the hills, and all the people from Kansas and back east are laughing at us about our snowstorm. But think about it. In the Midwest, I'm not sure they even have hills. So yeah, 2, 3, 4 inches of snow can really get to us. Other severe weather. We typically every year get a windstorm, right? So what are these weather storms? Why do they occur? Anybody know the science behind them? Anybody watch the Discovery Channel? Gosh, I love cable. The fact is Discovery Channel teaches you quite a bit, and so I'm addicted to the darn thing. They explained to me these weather systems that we get here in the Northwest essentially are the same thing as a hurricane that occur in the Atlantic, except for they're these cold weather things. Because it's just a big low pressure area, and you see it on the satellites swirling around. So it's not a hurricane, but it is a severe low pressure, and that's what creates the windstorm, because low pressure or high pressure flows to low pressure, right? And when it does, creates wind. And because of our mountains and the geography, the terrain around here, we tend to get it very severely, especially in the foothills and things like that. And a lot of other places, unlike the Northwest, don't have these big, tall Douglas firs all over the place. So, you know, we get typically these big rainstorms right before the windstorm. What does that do? Yeah, the ground gets like a sponge, soaks up all this water, gets real soft, and then the roots just let go with the wind, and boom, the trees start falling over. And boy, when they start falling, it's interesting. What other sort of thing can make trees fall? We remember the ice storm we had, when was it, about 10 years ago? We were supposed to get the big snowstorm, and what happened was it came down as freezing rain. And we don't get much freezing rain around here, but when it does occur, it builds up pretty quickly. So I remember driving up Peaslee Canyon, and these trees were falling across the road like this. Boom, 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 just like crazy, because they were so heavy from all that water and the freezing rain buildup on them. So that can be a pretty dangerous situation. And interestingly enough, people were driving right up that road, and several people had trees fall on their cars. Fortunately for them, they were fairly small alders that didn't take them out. But there have been a number of people in this area killed by falling trees. So, okay, lahars, and we're going to talk a little bit about this later. What's the biggest lahar that's ever happened in this state?
Mount St. Helens.
There we go. What happened there was Mount St. Helens had the big eruption, big landslide, and that created a lahar. And then after that, what happened? What was the result of the lahar happening? What happened as a subsequent action?
With like debris and stuff, like all across.
Yeah, debris and mud flows, okay, and went all the way to the ocean. So, see what happens there. Okay, terrorism. We've been lucky in this state. We haven't had a significant terrorist incident, and I can tell you that I believe, personally, and from the information I've been able to gather from all the courses that I've been to, that those men and women working out there in all different capacities have prevented it from happening, because it isn't because the terrorists don't want to. We've just got some awful good people out there working for us and trying to get it done. Here's the hazard map of the Auburn area. What we have here is flooding. You can see the overlays on here. 100-year flood, erosion, landslide, seismic, liquefaction, and look at the liquefaction area. Holy Toledo, are you kidding me? And then lahar. With Howard Hansen Dam, we rarely have catastrophic floods in the city of Auburn. It floods out in the Green River Valley all the time, but we don't have it here. That was one time, and it'll occur again sometime, where flooding was imminent and was occurring in the city of Auburn. So, and we have two rivers. The White River, actually they just improved the diking system on the White River. They're also working on the Green River a bit. So they're improving the dike system, but they are still earthen dikes, all right? 100-year flood, erosion. See, I don't know a lot about electricity, but I know that it wants to go to the ground and eventually back to Bonneville or something, wherever. Well, water, like electricity, wants to go home too, and its home is the ocean. So it's going to go to the lowest point, and you're not going to stop it, and I'm not going to stop it, and they temporarily stop it with dams, and that's about it. But you get in the way of those things, it doesn't care, it has no conscience, all right? Okay, liquefaction, we talked about that, seismic area, you name it, it's there, and then the lahar. Anybody know how long we have if Mount Rainier goes and we have a big lahar and then a debris flow?
Hour and a half.
Yeah, about 60 minutes. So, if that occurs, you need to get to the highest point. And all you folks who live on the hills around here, you'll have waterfront property or mudfront property after that occurs. Because if we get that, it's going to Seattle, all the way to Seattle. It will. Remember Mount St. Helens and what happened there? Went all the way to the ocean in, let's see, Tula River, right? And these things are, like I said, they're relentless. They have no conscience. They just want to go downhill. It's all gravity, folks, and you will not stop it. Earthquakes. That's probably the biggest thing that we have to worry about here, mostly because we have no warning. And if the big one does occur, that subduction zone quake does occur, the shaking will be as intense a thing as you've ever experienced in your life. And it's going to rock our world, folks, guaranteed. So, and that will cause fires, explosions, LPG tanks going off, natural gas lines. There will be utter devastation in this area. It'll trigger landslides, avalanches, tsunamis. If the earth shakes and there's a tsunami warning, you need to get at least a mile inland. At least a mile inland. Okay? If there are old landslides on Mount Rainier or the mountains that we have around in Mount Baker or other mountains, if there's old landslides or rock that has shifted a bit and is sort of loose, yeah, it'll tumble downhill, and then we get lahars, debris flow, yeah, everything kind of just filters on down. And guess who gets to deal with it? We do, because we live in the Green River Valley. Structural instability will occur. Dam failures can occur. And we don't have any dams around here that affect us, right? Or do we? Which ones they may? Okay, there's Howard Hansen is one. Which river is that? That's the Green River. What's the other one? Mud Mountain Dam, and that is the White River. Okay, we're stuck depending on how long you've been around Auburn. What's the other one that we got to worry about? It's not really a dam, but it will have a profound effect on us if during an earthquake it shakes, rattles, and rolls and fails. How about the big bathtub up there they call Lake Tapps? If it's full and we get the big shaker and those earthen dikes fail, guess what, folks? You're not going to have an hour. You may have 5 minutes, all right? Because it's going to come right down Kersey Way. And boy, it'll just introduce itself to the citizens of Auburn like that, okay? And they are really worried about that one during a big earthquake because it will shake a lot. So flash floods, and that's certainly what that would be. California faces the highest risk from earthquakes, followed by Washington, interestingly enough. Okay, we're going to show you a little earthquake video here. And this will show you what happens during a moderate earthquake. This is footage that they did in the lab. Okay, so this is a simulation. This is not real earthquake. All right, see how everything's shaking there? And it doesn't take long after the initial shaking for everything to fail, basically. Remember when I said your world was going to get rocked? If you're anywhere near those heavy filing cabinets, the water heater, and what happens to water heaters when they start rattling, rolling, and falling on the ground? They can become missiles because what's in them? Pressure, hot water, right? Steam, things like that. And then you get to the burn hazards too. So it's extremely important to make sure you strap your water heaters. And they're required by code to be done in new construction, but a lot of us got in before that happened. But it's really important to ban those things, okay? And it's a pretty simple process. You go get yourself some either plastic or metal banding, screw them into the studs, wrap it around the hot water heater, screw it into the studs, and you're good to go, okay? If you don't have flex couplings on it, then it would be important to change them to flex coupling. Everybody know what flex coupling is? Basically, copper and brass that have the ability to move back and forth quite a bit. When I first started teaching these classes, I thought, you know, I could probably be a little bit better prepared myself. Not that I wasn't completely and totally prepared for everything, but I walk up into my son's bedroom and, you know, soccer trophies up here and, you know, pictures up here and heavy stuff up on the walls and shelves and things like that. And I thought to myself, you know what, he's sleeping, earthquake occurs, this stuff falls right on his head. So, what do? You either move the heavy stuff down low And I would suggest that. But the important part is to make sure that things are either Velcroed, strapped, or glued down. All right? And that's impractical in a lot of cases, but especially in bedrooms, it's important because when people are sleeping, they can't react, right? Speakers on the wall, fall right on the teddy bear's head, and then you've got profound injuries right away. Confidence turns into cockiness, and that's when you get lax and you think that you can handle all these things, and so it makes people less prepared. There is nothing that is earthquake-proof. Nothing. All right? You can make them earthquake-resistant, and buildings are designed to sway, and we can tie things down and we can glue them to the floor or whatever, but nothing is earthquake-proof. All right? We can only lessen the danger from it. We can't completely delete it from the equation. Okay, deep quakes versus shallow quakes. Here's the Cascadia subduction zone, and essentially what happens here, it's hard to see in this one here, but the Juan de Fuca, or the oceanic plate, slides below the North American or the continental plate. And when that occurs, folks, hang on to your hats, because it's going to be exciting. All right? And you better be prepared for at least 72 hours, right? Food, water, shelter. Shallow quakes are indicated by blue, and you see them up here, here, here. Shallow quakes are very dangerous, obviously, because they're close to the surface. We get more profound shaking effect. Deeper quakes, which we've had on a number of occasions in here, haven't created near as much damage as a shallow quake will. Okay, here's the Washington earthquakes and what triggers them. Slip between the Juan de Fuca and the North American plates, that's the one that we really are scared of. It is considered a great earthquake between 8 and 9. They say it can go as high as 9.3, 9.4. The length of the shaking and how deep it is has a profound effect on how much damage there is. Okay, so if it's deep and doesn't shake very long, you know, we should be okay. Every 30 to 50 years, moderate, widespread, lasts about 30 seconds. The shallow earthquakes, major 7.5, that's the greatest one known for this top of the North American plate. Okay, here's some earthquake damage. San Miguel, I believe this one was from the Northwood earthquake. But you see what happens here, these stucco buildings right in here, all this cracking, stuff like that. Some of that may be structural, some of it may not be. Up here, a lot of chimneys and things like that. If you're in your home when an earthquake occurs, stay there. Drop, cover, and hold, right? When you crawl under something, what you are trying to do is find a void space. Okay, so that when the building falls on top of you, you will have a space that you can survive in. So that when you folks, after you're trained to do light search and rescue, and me, when I come in with heavy rescue, will be able to find a live person rather than a dead one. Okay? Collapsed highways are a big problem, especially up here. We have a lot of overpasses, right? 167, I-5, 405, you name it. All these overpasses, things like that, they can disappear on you. And I remember seeing video of cars driving right off these things in California earthquake. You know, people don't know what's happening, and all of a sudden the road disappears and they die. It's crazy. But that happens, and it will occur here in a major earthquake because we have so many of them. All right. Subduction zone earthquake occurs when plates of the Earth's crust pressing against each other suddenly slip. Yeah, and we talked about that. You see the oceanic plate right here slips underneath the continental plate, and we get all sorts of nasty stuff. Subduction zone quake in this area will be catastrophic. Change life as we all know it. Hey, fault line earthquake occurs when sections of ground pressing against each other suddenly slip. That's exactly what happens. They either go like this, or they go like this, over the top of each other, side by side, and that's where you get it. The Earth is shifting all the time. Anybody watch Discovery Channel? The other night they had a program on there about earthquakes. And it was interesting. I knew I was going to be teaching this class, and so I watched it pretty closely. And I'll tell you what, the amount of earthquakes that happen every single week on Earth is absolutely amazing. I had no idea that thousands of earthquakes occur every single day. And not just 2.1s or 3.0s, we're talking 5, 6 range all the time. Remember what I said about be inside, stay inside, don't run outside? That's because all this stuff right here, bricks, They fall on your head even if you're wearing a helmet. The only good the helmet will do you is that your head actually stays fairly intact, but you're still going to be deader than a doornail. So, drop, cover, and hold, and wait till the shaking stops. And then if you do decide to go outside, make sure you do it cautiously. People get killed all the time by falling debris. Glass coming out of these buildings. If you're downtown Seattle and there's a big earthquake, the streets will be covered with glass. Guaranteed. And one of those shards of glass come down, they will cut you in half. Here's what we want to do. That's a nice solid oak table up there. That will create a nice void space for you. Nice solid oak pillar right there. These two youngsters are doing exactly the right thing. So are these. There is some controversy now with some folks out there about whether or not you dive under a desk or whether you go to an area in the home. If you look here, this is a corner. It looks like there's a door here. Corners are the strongest point of any structure. Okay, you got a lot of 2x4s, 2x6s coming together. Or bearing wall, something that holds the next floor or the roof up. Those are the strongest points in a structure, and so that's where you want to be. All right? So you want to try and create yourself a survivable space, and that's why you get next to bearing walls, corners, doorways, and under heavy tables and desks. The desks in schools typically are that tubular steel stuff, so they're pretty good. They're pretty solid, okay? And because there's a bunch of them, they tend to distribute the weight if a ceiling falls, and so it creates more of a survivable space. Okay, move away from the power. If you're outside, I remember the earthquake. I was walking to school in 1962 when we had the big earthquake. And I remember I was living in West Seattle, and we were walking to school, and the ground started shaking, and this little old lady came out of her house, and she goes, "It's an earthquake, it's an earthquake, get away from the power lines." Well, she instinctively knew that the power lines were the biggest danger outside, and they are. Because when they come down, I've been in the firefighting business for a long time, and one of the things that happens when houses burn is the power lines that go to them fail and fall off. And if there's still power going through them, this is like a big dragon that is popping huge holes in cement like this. Yes. Yeah. It's absolutely amazing what happens with electrical lines, big ones. And they'll pop cement and asphalt and dig holes and things. So you need to stay as far away from that stuff as absolutely possible. Stay low to the ground, cover your head. If you're outside, make sure you don't go near a building, okay? Because chimneys and walls and things fail. If you're driving, you know what? It says move away from the power lines. The power lines aren't the big fear here, because if you're near a car and a power line falls on it, you're okay. It wants to go to ground, right? It wants to go back to Bonneville, electricity does, right? So how's it going to get there? Goes through the vehicle, through the tires, rubber tires, and back to ground. Just so long as you don't step out of your vehicle, touching your vehicle and the ground at the same time, should be okay. The big factor is the poles falling on your vehicle. That's what you want to be worried about. Okay? You don't want to be on overpasses or bridges, things like that. But I'm telling you, if you're trying to drive in an earthquake and you're on an overpass, it's just very hard because you have no idea. It feels like your wheels are wobbling right off the vehicle. I had a lady during the last earthquake. I was at Station 32 at 21st and R Street. She's driving down the road. She stops right in front of the fire station during the earthquake, gets out of her vehicle and runs around it twice trying to figure out what's wrong with her car. I said, "Ma'am, it's an earthquake. Your wheels are still attached to the vehicle, guaranteed." But isn't it interesting, her reaction? She had no idea what was going on. Pull over and stop and be ready to walk. Yeah, that's why you have a kit in your vehicle. Liquefaction. That upper slide pretty much tells you what's going to happen in this area. The valley floor will turn to quicksand, okay? Because it's fill and it's sand from thousands of years of rivers pouring down and volcanoes and things like that coming down in this valley and depositing sand and soil and all sorts of things, okay? It's great fertile soil, and that's why this was a great farming community for decades and decades. But when it comes to earthquakes, well, you probably want to be on the hills rather than the valley floor, because that's going to happen right there. Buildings are going to fall down. This was in Mexico right here, I think. U.S. is third in the world after Japan and Indonesia in number of active volcanoes. Yeah, we got lots of them right here in this state. Mount Rainier, Mount St Helens is the most famous one, Mount Baker, we can go on, the list is long. Cascade Range has a number of active and inactive volcanoes. The hazards include, like we talked about earlier, toxic gases. We get that, lava and pyroclastic flows. Remember the pyroclastic flow from Mount St Helens killed a lot of people. There were 67 people, I think, killed in the Mount St Helens volcano, and a lot of those were killed by that flow that came down. There you go, Mount St Helens before the big eruption. This wasn't before the first one. This is when the mountain was heating up and the scientists were all studying. You can see all the snow is basically gone on Mount St Helens, but look at that beautiful cone shape there. Just one of the most gorgeous mountains around. And there she is. That was spring in 1980. What was the day that Mount St. Helens blew?
May 18th.
May 18th, right. But this is before that, you can tell, because you still have the beautiful cone shape, right? Aha, there you go. And this area right here is what fell down. Just completely slid off. Ah, yes. I watched a little Discovery Channel, and they had a deal on Mount Rainier specifically just a week ago. And they talked about this mega disaster that would occur should we have a catastrophic eruption of Mount Rainier. And believe you me, it will be catastrophic, and it will affect all our lives. And if you are not prepared, you will not survive. Okay? So it's there, and as you can see, it's fairly active. If you look there, the most active one obviously is St. Helens. It seems to erupt every 5 minutes or so. Then you go down to Mount Shasta, that's pretty active, Medicine Lake, and then Glacier Peak, and then Mount Rainier. And you can see how many years ago from the graphic there, how long ago it erupted. And it certainly wasn't that long ago in geological terms, is it? Landslides and mudslides, we have them around here. One of the most famous videos on YouTube is that video in Gig Harbor where these construction workers were going up to a place, and here comes the mountain or the side of the hill, this nice slow slide starting out, and then all of a sudden it gains speed, and this guy shoves his pickup into reverse and he's driving backwards trying to get away from it. Well, this mudslide in this residential area starts picking up cars and trees and big boulders and stuff like that, and he's videotaping it the entire time, and you can hear him screaming at the driver, "Faster, go faster!" as they're in reverse. Every time we have significant rainfall that occurs over a period of a few days, or, hey, we're in Western Washington, a few weeks, right? The monsoons are coming. We have earth move downhill. It just does. That's the way it is. The most destructive type of debris flow are lahars. We talked a lot about that earlier. And lahars are the most dangerous. If you live in the Ording Valley, you do drills. The kids there do them every month. And it's really important. They have not got a lot of time to get out of there if a lahar occurs on Mount Rainier. They say about 60 minutes, but that's pushing it. Okay? And the fact of the matter is that there's not a whole lot of roads going out of there. But if a lahar occurs, luckily here in Auburn we have some time to get out of here, but you want to get to high ground as quickly as possible because it's coming, and that lahar has your name on it if you're here in the Auburn Valley, guaranteed. All right, here's the Mount St. Helens debris flow. If you've ever been up in this area afterwards, I've done quite a bit of hiking up here, and you can see it's like moonscape in the beginning. So you see all this area in here, and this is where the debris flow was. Look at this. I can't remember how many board feet of timber they talked about being on the ground, but it was just absolutely amazing. Flattened it like toothpicks. Just gone. Although nature's a wonderful thing, and it wasn't but a couple years later, you know, the weeds started, and then, you know, the trees started growing, and the animals started coming back. Pretty amazing thing. Dams, we talked about them. Okay, there's Howard Hansen Dam. You can see that's not a whole lot of water behind it. It gets nice and full on occasion. And then you can see the slides where the water goes down. There's Mud Mountain Dam. And those two can create some pretty huge problems should they ever fail. Floods, we have them every year. Typically, they're not catastrophic floods in our area because of Howard Hanson and Mud Mountain Dam. They control the water flows as much as they can, although they allow some areas to flood so that we don't flood in the major residential and commercial areas of the Auburn Valley. Floods and water events kill more people than all the other natural disasters and man-made disasters put together. Floods, water, okay? It is nothing to be trifled with. And unfortunately, the United States has yet to come to terms with having a national response to these type of emergencies. They still rely a lot on, locals and firefighters and boats with bunker gear on. It's just the craziest thing. Fortunately for you folks here in this area, we have a very robust water rescue program in and around this area. So, okay, we're as subject to flooding as anything else. The good part about around here, outside of a dam failure, is that we know when the floods are going to come. We'll know 2 weeks in advance because, Steve Poole gets on the news and his weather report and he goes, well, we got 40 days and 40 nights of rain coming and the rivers are going to rise and there'll be localized flooding and then there'll be widespread flooding, so everybody get prepared. There is some flash flooding in this area, but typically we got pretty good warning. Okay? If water is deeper than this high and you're driving a vehicle and the water's moving, don't drive through it. Okay? Water this deep that is moving quicker than a couple miles an hour will lift your vehicle up and float it away. Community members sandbagging. This is where certs come in really handy, okay, because we're an organized bunch, dedicated to what we can do, and the city will often try and organize people to get things like this going, and the leadership that you folks provide by dedicating your time to it shows off to other people, and then everybody gets involved in it. There have been some, for instance, Monroe has been saved by citizens who got involved and sandbagged during floods. Flood damage affects pets too, and that was a big thing during Katrina and other hurricane events. It will be a factor in any disaster that occurs. Our pets are important to us. And so when we are evacuating and rescuing people, it is a consideration that we have to think about, okay? Because some people just will not part with their animals. And some people in these hurricane events and flood events die because of it. Okay, winter storms. Yeah, we get some snow around here, we get some ice around here, and we certainly get winter flooding and the cold. Typically, though, we don't have big extremes. We live in Western Washington, and the extremes are from the lowest temperature typically is somewhere in the teens, and the high temperature is somewhere in the 90s. And that's severe to us, but you talk to somebody in Kansas and they don't think it's that severe. So we have a couple of weeks of very cold weather. Typically we'll get 1 or 2 snowstorms a year, which just paralyzes all of us, and it is breaking news on TV for like 3 days, right? The fact is you got to deal with it and deal with it smartly. Auto accidents, yeah, if your blood pressure is 210 over 120 and you've had 3 prior heart attacks, you probably ought not to be out there shoveling snow. Wait a day, it's going to melt and be gone anyway. Hypothermia, asphyxiation. Now this is a really important point. I cannot tell you in the last 3 years how many times I've been on CO poisoning. And so education is the key here. You cannot bring your barbecue inside and use it as heating or cook with it. Even your propane-powered barbecue you don't bring inside, you can't do that. Generators, you don't have them next to the house or next to an open window. You vent them someplace else. You don't run them in your garage. Things like that are really important to recognize, so education's a big key here. Okay, and then house fires, from candles, from burning wood in those zero-clearance display-only fireplace things, where actually the only thing you should burn in is a Presto log. In my house I have a brick fireplace. It's a real fireplace, and I wanted it specifically because if the heat ever went out, I could, heat my house a little bit anyway and stay warm. But so many of these new ones are either gas-powered or they were never designed to have a roaring fire in it. And so they have about this much insulation, air insulation between the pipe and the structural members of the house, and it heats up, catches structural members on fire, and you have a house fire. Yeah, I remember I responded to this one here. This was interesting. We get wet, heavy snow around here, and that's what happens. Now, this is pronounced seiche, and they talk about a series of standing waves. That's not exactly accurate. Standing waves, for you whitewater rafters, are those waves in the river that never move. They just, because the river's flowing downhill, there's rocks underneath it, they come up and they curl and they break, right? That is called a standing wave. Waves in this case are like the ones in your bathtub when you get in it and it sloshes back and forth. That's what they're talking about here. And that can happen, and another reason why we're concerned about lake taps during a major earthquake. Okay, because it can happen and you'll get these waves sloshing back and forth, and that weakens the dikes. So, again, don't have to be paranoid, but we should be aware of what could happen. Tornadoes, interestingly enough, we do have them around here. There's one in Washington, that's Eastern Washington, near Fairchild. You can see an F3 hit Vancouver, F3 tornado west of Spokane, and F2 in rural Stevens County. There was one in Kent a number of years ago, an F1. There have been several. They do occur around here, but typically they're not very strong, and typically they don't cause a whole lot of damage. But if there is an earthquake, a tornado warning, it pays to get somewhere safe, and typically that is the most interior room, typically a bathroom or something like that, in your house. Okay? High winds, we talked about that, and we get them typically somewhere in the fall, late fall, winter to late winter area, those big low pressure things that come around, and we get them. Trees fall down and we get power lines down. Okay? If power lines are down, do not call 911. There's no reason to call 911 for power lines down. When the power goes out, everybody knows about it, power companies are getting out there, and unless it's causing a fire or damage, or if it's popping up and down, you know, doing that snake thing, what usually happens is they have breakers on all of the power poles around here. So when a line drops off of it, it pops a breaker and then the power goes out to it anyway. But in the rare case where it doesn't, then call 911 by all means. Pandemics, they occur from time to time and they kill millions and millions of people. That's why you hear all of the talk about pandemics. Flu has killed more people over the years than any other single thing. It wipes out entire civilizations in the past. The flu is bad stuff. So it is always prudent to take general precautions and protection, especially when you're searched and you're going to be dealing with people in medical situations with trauma and things like that. You have to remember to take universal precautions. Gloves, eye protection, mouth protection, things like that. With what we know now, you are exposing yourself to any number of things, you know, everything from meningitis to the flu, things like that. So precautions that you take are really important, because if you become sick or injured, you are no longer of any use to anybody. In fact, you become not an asset, but a liability, right? And that's not something that can happen, okay? So that's why it's really important to be safe, number one, when you're doing any sort of operation like this, and protect yourself so that you don't become part of the problem, okay? All right, we're gonna talk about what you can do around the home to make sure that you're secure first and then your neighbors are secure. First, let's go with the most important one, and that's the gas shutoff, because this is the one that will cause catastrophic damage, fires, and kill people, okay? This is your typical gas meter. You'll find this outside your house somewhere if you have gas. This is the simplest thing to do. It looks really intimidating, but it is not. It is attached to your house, and it has a valve on it, and it looks just like this right here. That's the valve, and all you need to do is turn it so that these two holes line up. You know, anybody know what these two holes are for right here? That's it. That's so the gas company can say, no more gas for you. Okay? And that's what happens. And if you turn it there, it's shut off. Okay? Because that's where the lock can go. So when these two little holes are lined up, you are off and no more gas flows. Now, there are probably other shutoffs in your home if you have gas, like there's probably a ball valve somewhere in line that goes to the furnace or the hot water heater or something like that. This is the one you want on the outside of the house. That is on. Okay? And you can tell because it's in line with the pipe that's going in. Off, and this is some of them may be a little stiff. Don't worry about it. It will turn if you apply enough force. Just make sure you turn it the right way. Okay? So, and this one turns all the way around because it's a ball valve. That is off. I cannot make it any simpler than that. Remember our rule, keep it simple, stupid. The gas company has served it up for me. This is as simple as it gets, and I get it. Okay? So if I get it, I know you folks will. Okay, the next most important one is power. Now, most of us who live in houses that were built sometime after the 1940s don't have fuses. Anybody have houses with fuses in them anymore, those screw-in fuses? Thank goodness. Okay, I grew up in a house that my dad was always putting another fuse in. Modern technology allows us just to flip a switch. So, we have power. Okay? Now, most electricians will tell you in a situation they like to stand on a piece of wood or something so that they're grounded or have decent shoes on, something like that. You don't do this in your bare feet, folks. Okay? Have some sort of rubber-soled shoes on, stand on a piece of wood, something like that, so you're insulated. That's the whole idea. I don't get electricity a whole lot, but I do know that it wants to go where? Yeah, back to Bonneville, through the ground and through me. Do not be a conductor, all right? So, on this panel, you see a bunch of switches here. The main one always has something connecting it to another one. And really, you can flip all of them off like this. Or you can just flip the main off, which is this one right here. And that'll shut everything down. Okay? Electricians will tell you they like to shut them down in series, so one at a time. But in houses, it's really okay to go ahead and flip the main breaker. Because you're probably not going to have power anyway, right? So all you're trying to do is make sure it doesn't come back on. So, until you want it to. Water shutoff. Really what water shutoff does is prevents a whole lot of extraordinary damage that you don't need to have. This valve is much like the one on the gas meter. So you use the same wrench, except for you might have to dig around a little bit because this is typically in the ground. And where it usually is somewhere on the street side. Okay? And it's got a meter on it that will be spinning wildly if you have a water leak. So what you want to do is take your handy-dandy crescent wrench or a specialty wrench that you can get from the guy that sells all the disaster supplies and turn it like that. Okay? This one has a lock on it too. With water shutoffs, you want this to be perpendicular to the pipe. All right, that means it's off. If it's in line with the pipe, that means that water will be flowing. Okay, this one's shut off all the way. This is a little bit different. It's got a lock right here. And you know what? The good part is you'll know because this thing will stop spinning almost immediately. Okay? Good enough. Now, we get to what I consider to be the most important thing in this class, and that is personal and family preparedness. Okay, here is my mobile disaster kit. I said 72 hours, right? Food, water, shelter. I'm not joking about this, folks, okay? This is serious, serious stuff, and you've got to be prepared to survive on your own for at least 72 hours. I would suggest a little bit longer than that. And items that you have available to you are limited only by the space you have. In my truck, I don't have a trunk, obviously I have a truck, but I got a back seat in it, and all this stuff fits really nicely under the back seat, especially when it's all inside this handy-dandy little package. Food. Meals ready to eat. Good. Pass that around. That's the old style there. Not that great. The good part is you can go to just about any Army Navy store or surplus store or Dick's Sporting Goods or something like that, and you get the new kind. And these are really good. And Katrina, the first time I was introduced to these, because I'm an old dinosaur that ate sea rats when I was in the military, the cans, heavy stuff. These things are fantastic. And this may be the best of the bunch. Beef, chili, and beans. Make sure you're sleeping in your own tent. There. Shelter. Shelter can be as simple as a silver blanket, survival blanket, or as intricate as a tent or some shelter you have in your backyard. Okay? I would recommend that you have something in your disaster kit that will keep you dry and warm for an extended period of time. Okay? And a decent tent doesn't cost that much. In your survival kit, I recommend a little pocket guide to survival. This is a good little guide. It costs like $1.95 at a sporting goods store. And it's got all sorts of neat information in it on all different things, wilderness survival too, but medical, how you build things, how you cook things, all sorts of different stuff. Protection from rain, hand warmers and foot warmers, chem lights, because they last a long time, waterproof matches. Okay, I know you guys watch Discovery, and I sure as heck do. Has anybody seen Man vs. Wild or that other guy who does the survival? Pretty cool stuff, isn't it? I went to survival school, and I didn't go to the Air Force hot tubs and condo survival school. I went to the other one where you had to stay tactical. Well, the thing about it is that starting fires is very hard, especially in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. And I don't care if it's summer or winter. On the west side of the mountains, starting a fire is hard because everything's wet, okay? And I guarantee you, unless you've practiced it over and over and over again, you will not light a fire with the bowstring, okay? You will tear your hands up, you'll create blisters and blood and all sorts of stuff, but you won't get a fire started. Guaranteed, okay? The best way to get a fire started is with matches. And more matches. Here, pass this around. And folks, I know how much money's in here. Why do I have cash?
Because you never know when you're going to need it.
Because I guarantee you that this thing here is not going to work, okay? And when you're out there trying to buy gasoline, do you think the fellow at 7-Eleven is going to go, oh yeah, no problem, just swipe your credit card? First of all, there's no electricity, right? So the pumps probably won't work. So you're going to have to be buying gas from the guy who's got the sign on the corner going, gas, $10 a gallon. You know? Well, he's only taking cash, folks, okay? And another thing is, cash talks, credit cards in a disaster situation do nothing. Okay, so it's always good to have a little bit of cash somewhere. Medication is really important, and so you should have an extra supply of medication in your disaster kit. It's really, really important, okay? Fire starters. Oh, did we forget about these? These will burn for a long time. They burn really hot, and they will start green wood on fire, okay? I guarantee you, I can start a fire without a match. Okay, I was taught to do it and I practice it. But do you want to press the easy button or do you want to do it the hard way? I'm going easy. Okay, tools. Oh, matches. Huh. Something that really works too is a nice multi-tool. And these things are worth their weight in gold. And they actually will shut off gas and do a bunch of things. It's got, you know, knives and screwdrivers and all sorts of neat stuff. This is probably one of the handiest, dandiest little tools I've ever seen. And it is just a cheap little $4 e-tool, we used to call them, entrenching tool. Little tiny shovel, dig holes with it. Chalk, rescue blankets, ponchos, harmonicas, yeah. You got to have something to keep yourself occupied. Sorry. Okay. And you know what? Remember, if you have children, keeping them occupied is important. So in your disaster kit, you might have something, I don't know, a harmonica, anything to keep them occupied, because the stress level for them is going to be huge, okay? And they are dealing with things, and that's why I advise adults, you got to understand that panic does you no good. Not to mention, fear and panic is contagious, all right? If you're panicking, then they're going to panic, and you're going to panic. And it's, you know what? It is as contagious as a pandemic, okay? And so that's why you're here, and that's why you're participating in this, so that you are prepared, and when you're prepared, you do not panic, okay? All right. So, first aid kit. They have canned first aid kits that you can buy, and you can pay a lot of money for them, or you can get yourself a little fish tackle box like I did, and you load it up with the stuff that you might need, which isn't always bandages. You know, some lip balm and some, oh, I got a toothache during a disaster. The dentist is right down the street, but his place is on the ground, and he can't give me a shot of Novocaine and pull the tooth out. So a little bit of Orgel or something like that really goes a long ways. Stuff for poison oak and poison ivy and nettle stings. Bandages. Yes. Don't leave home without them, especially if you don't know who you're giving mouth-to-mouth to. Okay? Little bag mask that has a one-way valve in it so that when you're giving mouth-to-mouth to somebody, you don't get all that junk that they vomit back up into your face. The fact of the matter is that in a disaster, you're going to see things that you would never, ever want to see in your entire life, okay? And you're going to have to make choices. And those choices may come down to saying, okay, she's blue, she's cyanotic, she has a horrible head wound. I'm sorry, but she's dead, okay? And there's nothing I can do for her except for cover up with a blanket. But that's what I mean, is that you will experience things and your life will change so profoundly because of the things you see. And you have to be prepared for that also. Psychologically, mentally, physically. Okay? All right. I appreciate your attention tonight. Thank you very much, and you've been great.